Right, we will get started. I'll just keep admitting people as they come along. So yeah, once again, apologies for the error. We had a slight little IT hiccup on our side. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We will still be finished by 1 o'clock, but if you have any questions or anything that you don't get time to answer, please put them in the. We can chase up afterwards. So just to introduce myself. My name is Michael Graham. I'm a senior project manager for Truman Change. So I will be hosting today with Georgia doing the majority of the presenting. So I just want to officially welcome you to our third Change Chat of May 2025. And the way that these work, if you haven't been to one before, is that we pick a particular topic and then we provide you with tips and expertise on that topic. We want and we really like these sessions to be really interactive, and we want them to be really informal. We've got a few breaks. This one will be a little bit different in as much as Georgia will be doing a presentation, and we have got a few breaks planned for the session where you can ask questions. When we come to those moments, please feel free to put your hand up or unmute yourself. Alternatively, if you want to put these questions or comments in the chat, I will then ask them when we get to these break points. As you may have noticed, we do record these sessions, and everybody who is booked on to the session will receive a copy of the recording. So if for any reason you have to unexpectedly leave, or if you want to share this with anybody else, you can do so. Also, the recording will go on our YouTube page. So today's session is on communication and engagement during the local government reorganisation. So this is the next of one of our several LGR focused change chats, and our aim is to ensure that these chats are very solution focused, and you will see that hopefully from today's conversation. So I will hand you over to Georgia. So Georgia, if you'd like to, I know probably quite a few people on the call know you, but if you'd like to introduce yourself and then give a bit of an overview about today's topic and start with your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. And so many names and faces that I recognise. It's like a warm hug from the communications local government world. So hello, folks and everyone. So yeah, you know me, many of you. Georgia Turner. I spent nearly 30 years working in-house in local government and was comms and engagement lead for the Dorset reorganisation just a few years ago. So welcome along this afternoon. As Michael says, we'll try and keep it quite practical. I've got a few slides, but it's not, I promise it won't be death by PowerPoint or anything horrendous like that. I'm an associate here at Truman Change. So one of the pieces of work that myself and founder Lucy Truman and a couple of others have been doing over the last probably 2.5 months, 3 months or so, is a piece of research where we've interviewed over 25 senior officers and local government chief execs, corporate directors, program managers, lots of different types of colleagues, comms people, of course. And we've explored lots of different topics around that. People who've been through LGR and to glean their experience. And we're working on a report at the moment, which we're going to make available imminently for free to people in the sector. So we explored lots of topics like culture, comms, engagement, all sorts of different things, the issues that people will be facing and that are going to be live for all of you for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, depending what timetable you're on. And of course, we saw that comms and engagement was one of the key areas. And I know from having been there that comms and engagement is one of the key areas that is an issue for a lot of people coming up. And it's kind of compounded by the government advice. You know, you're probably seeing these lines, and I'm going to recite for you in your sleep and worrying about them, you know, overnight and things like that. But you know, the guidance that says proposals should include evidence of local engagement. Proposals should consider issues of local identity and cultural and historical importance. And the one we love to hate the most, of course, is it is for councils to decide how best to engage locally in a meaningful and constructive way. And this activity should be engagement activity should be evidenced in your proposal. So we know we have to consult, we know how to engage, we know we have to work with our residents and stakeholders, but there's the added complexity of how do we do that? What format, what methodology do we take? Who do we engage with? What is good enough and what is good? Because there probably will be a difference for us between realistically what is good enough in the time we have available and what is actually good that we want to do. So a quick experience share from me from my time in Dorset. We called this kind of stage of the program that you were all in now, reshaping your councils. It was a little bit different from what you guys are all going through, in that we were rightly or wrongly choosing and requesting to change the structures where we were. So there was nine councils, 2 unitaries, and the rest of the county, primarily rural, was in a 2-tier structure. Um, so we effectively had our phase that you are now, was communications and engagements, very much to inform what is the final proposal. Well, first of all, are we going to put a proposal into the Secretary of State? Are we going to say, yes, we do want to proceed and change our structures to a unitary structure for the whole county? And secondly, what is that option going to look like? What is the proposal going to be? So we had a kind of two-stream campaign running, quantitative and qualitative public and stakeholder consultation. And yes, we did use the C word. And I know a lot of people are maybe holding back from talking about consultation and focusing much more on engagement. And we can talk a little bit about that in a while, but we called it public consultation. That's what we felt it was. Um, and alongside that, a communications and engagement campaign. So you can see that graphic is just, it's quite a vanilla graphic, really, in terms of look and feel. We didn't create any kind of campaign brand then. We gave it a name, Reshaping Your Councils, but effectively it was, what we wanted to show was, this is all the councils in the county working together, all 9 of them, to establish the best way forward. And what that engagement looked like, well, we effectively did a household survey, which was to get that representative sample. We did an open survey because we knew that we would face, and it was a lot of political pressure as well, that, yeah, but you didn't ask me, kind of response that we know is going to be out there, and dare I say, potentially whipped up by some a little bit. And as well as some really in-depth workshops and interviews with key stakeholder groups. And you can see there the results that we got. So out of a population in Dorset of about actually, I put 450,000. That's not correct. It's actually about 900,000, because that's just BCP. So it's 900,000. My apologies for that. We got 12,542 responses to the open survey. We got 4,258 to the household survey, and you can see all those other engagements, that returns that we got. I think one thing to bear in mind here is the length of the survey. It was quite short. So we had the supplementary information. The survey itself was quite short. Literally focused on, do you think we should change? And if you think we should change, which option do you favour? And there was scope for open comment on, why do you favour this one option over another? So, and I appreciate, for what you're going through now, it's very different, because you've got some very clear factors, and I want to explore things like cultural identity, community identity, sense of place, all those things. And we did some of that through the workshops and the depth interviews, and we got some of that feedback through the open questions on the survey. But the questions itself were really quite short. So alongside that, as I mentioned, we kind of had our communications and engagement support, and that was about an 8-page document, A4 document, which focused on, this is what, right from back from the beginning, this is what you've got now. This is the rationale and context for why we think we should change. Here are the options, and here are some of the key features of the options, which areas they would make up, what the population might be, what evidence we had already from the data that we had commissioned that was maybe positive, and maybe which were the risks that maybe would need to be managed. And we put as much of that as we could that was sensible and accessible and interesting and relevant and relatable for people. Um, we also talked about the option that had been ruled out and why. And again, this was easy because it was only one. And I know, through some areas I'm working with, they've got 3 options down from 12 or something. So you're probably not going to be able to say, here's the 9 options that we've ruled out and why. But there was a lot of talk in Dorset about a county-wide unitary for the whole of the county, including the 2 unitaries that already existed. So we had to explain why that wasn't on the table. And why that had been ruled out by all councils involved. And then we had some persuasive content in there around actually why it was important to have your say, as well as some really practical stuff about how to do it. So that's me so far. Did you have any questions in the chat, Michael, or do you want me to keep going?
We've had a question slash comment. Basically, it's come from Sarah. It said that's the fundamental difference and issue, isn't it? We're not bidding. We should be engaging, but it's not really
Yeah,
a consultation. It will be
yeah,
happening anyway, although quite
yeah,
the deal each council will get is unknown.
yeah, yeah. That's a fair point. We, even though you look back and politically you think, you know, was the mind made up that we wanted to change structures? Probably in the
Yeah.
majority. But yeah, actually, it's a fair point. It's happening whether the public like it or not. So we need to be realistic about what can people, stakeholders, and even councils influence here. It's not whether the change happens; it's what that change looks like when it goes ahead.
Yeah, and Sarah's just commented on her own comment and said, and what that does is compound the issue that the public says, why ask us? You'll do it anyway. It's a trust
Yeah,
issue, which you've kind of just touched
yeah,
on.
absolutely. So it's really important to set out what is it that people can actually influence, and partly that's the government does say that it's wants to hear about a whole range of criteria and factors, some of which you'll get from other data, but things like sense of community, sense of place, those kind of cultural links, that people will care about, and even some of the other factors like cost of services and efficiencies and things like that. Perhaps you look at things like what are people's relative priorities, what was their sense of place, where do they align their loyalties, for want of a better phrase, with, in terms of where they live, where they feel that they live, where they say that they live. Um, and maybe that is what you can say that is actually going to influence, along with other data, the eventual option. I say option, we know it's probably going to be options that go into the proposals for government.
We have had a question just about your work. It's was it a joint consultation engagement programme, and did any of the individual councils undertake any?
Yes, at the beginning, it was all 9 councils endorse it, were signed up to the engagement process. So I led the comms and engagement group. I sat on the programme board, um, with all the chief execs, all the leaders as well. Um, and yeah, it was all 9 councils going ahead with the engagement at this stage together. Once that was done, that's really when more of the divisions came out. They were bubbling throughout the engagement, certainly at political level. But by the time we got the results through, a lot of councils, and a couple of councils in particular, were very much openly campaigning against this. And one of the issues that you'll face, possibly over through the engagement, and certainly when you get to the proposal stage, will be around that disinformation and how you tackle that across your areas, because there was loads of it, and it was a tricky thing to challenge. But we did have a lot of data, and we did have a lot of evidence, and we played it straight down the line. We kind of did actually shy away from that kind of emotional case, which was very much being made against this. It's these nasty big councils coming to take us over. It was very much that kind of feel, and we stuck straight down the line with factual information, because we were technically seen as that nasty big council, because I work, even though I was working on behalf of the program, I worked in Bournemouth at the time, which was a reasonable sized unitary, tiny really now compared to what unitaries look like nowadays. um but if we'd gone and done engagement in Christchurch, it actually would have looked like we were the nasty big council taken over. So we had to be very careful with what we could do. So we just played it. But a lot of it ended up then playing out in the media, which again is very difficult. So yeah, it's all that fun to come.
We've had a couple more questions, but before I come on to that, just a comment from Laura, who said, being able to have their say and being there for the development is a huge part of accepting the change that will happen. They didn't start the
Yes.
car, but they're there for the journey. And she came up with that the other day. But
Oh, we like that.
some follow-up questions just in regards to the work that you did did any of the feedback change the outcome or shape the decision making, is the first question.
Well, I think so, because, well, depends if you've got your cynical hat on, or your positive, optimistic, rose-tinted glasses on. When the councils went out to engagement, there was no stated preferred option. They hadn't even said we want to change. So one of the options that was included was current status quo. And I know you can't do that, but that was one of the options that was included, was status quo. And then there were three options, basically different sized unit trees. It was all for 2 unit trees, but different sizes. So it was very much around kind of that boundary piece. What is the footprint of one council over the other if we change? And actually, there was overwhelming public support for the option that was adopted that exists now in Dorset. So you've got BCP council and you've got effectively a rural urban split. Um, there was also some other data and evidence that backs that up too. And yeah, so I would say yes, but also we were lucky in that the other data, rest of the data, the financials, the sustainability, all those kinds of things, they all stacked up in that way as well.
Yeah. One more question, then we'll move on to the next steps. Basically, at what point did your comms work stream get set up? Was it combined with engagement or separate? Was it before or after final proposals were submitted?
The comms work stream was pretty much the first work stream to get set up, because I was pulled in by our leader and said, we're going to announce this in 4 days' time. Well, it was actually tomorrow, and I managed to persuade him it would actually be in 4 days' time. That it was an aspiration to have a conversation about it. So in a very informal way, comms was there right at the beginning, as it should be. But very quickly they established program governance. Comms was a work stream on that program governance. So all those kind of corporate functions, they were set up really early on. Comms was one of the earliest. Obviously, legal and democratic was one of the earliest within that program management structure. And then, excuse me, and then of course HR, IT, all those. Once you know you're going ahead, all those other corporate work streams come in, as well as kind of that service development work stream. And yeah, it was comms and engagement. Engagement was like a subgroup of comms, and we were just again quite lucky with our staffing structures in that in both in all the both the unitaries and the county, the comms guys we managed the consultation functions anyway. So it was easy to make those links up between the two. But yeah, they kind of had their own sub working group to kind of manage their area of expertise, designing the surveys and developing and overseeing that work.
Thanks, Georgia. That's everything that's in the chat.
Okay, right. So probably getting onto this really, but we can see that issues that you're facing right now, I think, are lack of clear guidance on expectations. And I'm using this phrase. I actually pinched it from Louise. I don't know if she's on the call, probably not. Or she might be. Louise from Thurrock on a call the other day. She said, it's not even just what is good; it's what is good enough. And I thought that was a really good phrase, because none of us want to just do what's good enough. We all want to do brilliant work, but we also have to be realistic, especially if we're in a priority program, that the timeframes are really, really full on, and really, really challenging. I remember being, it's quite overwhelming. It's quite overwhelming at times. Where do I start? What do I do first? What do the members want? Oh, look, they've thrown in this other piece of data. Oh, look, this council over here has decided it's not playing ball anymore. Oh, look, this option over here has suddenly been ruled out when we thought it was ruled in. It's like someone just needs to stop and have a line in the sand and say, this is what we're going to engage on. But until you get that, you're just in kind of that perpetual state of rolling, rolling, rolling with it and trying to do the best job that you can. And then those competing positions, and engagement exercises, who's going to launch first, what are they going to ask, what options. It's just so counterproductive, and it's so confusing to the public. And it just compounds that, they never talk to each other, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. All those negative, horrible things that are not true about local government, but that people say, it just kind of plays right into it. I understand it has to happen, because if you're in a large county where there's 13, 14 councils, getting unanimity on that is really, really tricky, really tricky. But yeah, I get that's a worry for you all right now. So what might you be able to do with it? Well, I've been doing a bit of work recently, just kind of trying to set it into context in terms of local government reorganisation. I'm doing a bit of work with the LGA around that as well. And kind of adapted, you've probably all seen this kind of standard engagement triangle, which normally has got 5 or 6 levels in it, I think, because one of them is also, the top one is like, we just defer all the decisions to our stakeholders. Well, we know that for LGR, that is not an option, because actually we are, even though we put the final proposals in, we are not the decision maker here. It's government. So I think your starting point is kind of what level of engagement do we actually want to do? And really, communicating and informing is the basis of all engagement. That is the starting point. You must get that right. You must do it well. What you're communicating must be clear, relevant, accurate, and accessible, because people need, if you're then going to go and ask people for review, they need to be able to give an informed and considered opinion. So your communications is absolutely essential. And then I've called this like the asking and listening phase. So, it might be view seeking, you might be getting ideas, you might be getting feedback, but you're not necessarily saying, we are going to necessarily go with what you want. This isn't a vote, it's not really even a consultation, it's view seeking. It's effectively that first level of engagement of seeking opinions and asking advice, asking for views. Consulting, I think, is when you're more likely to directly link the results of your engagement with the final proposal that you put in. I would say, really, the work that we're doing at the moment, or you're doing at the moment, around public engagement, really is consultation, particularly if you're going out on specific options. If you're asking more general questions, so say you're focusing only on high level government criteria like efficiencies and service improvements, and sustainable authorities and place identity. You could say that actually that's more kind of view seeking, getting opinions, quite broad. But if you are asking about options, maybe you're asking people to rank options, maybe you're asking people which options they prefer, which options they would rule out if they were involved. You might not want to do that, but you might. I would say that really is more formal consultation, because you should not be asking that if you're not going to take any notice of it. If it's not going to influence the decision, don't ask it. And then the top line is co-creating. Well, we know we won't be doing that at this stage, but there may be scope once you know what your organizational configuration looks like, and you get into service redesign. Maybe there, possibly not for comms, possibly, but more likely other services. You may well be moving on then to that kind of co-creation space of, we've got an opportunity here. This is a once in a lifetime thing to change, opportunity to change the way things have been, and to actually look at a lot of the worries and concerns and issues that were raised through your engagement, and say, okay, well, how can we fix some of this stuff? And let's do it together. Excuse me. So another thing that I've developed for the LGA is this kind of 7 A's, 7 steps to LGR comms and engagement. It's a bit of a work in progress, actually, because I don't think it's been anywhere yet. Actually, but it might be helpful in just kind of, when you're in that overwhelmed space and like, what on earth is happening, and where do I start? It might be helpful to just go, okay, let's just put some stuff down into sections. We like a little diagram, we like a little process to help us get everything organized. So I suppose, linking back to the diagram we looked at just now, start with your aims. What actually do you want to influence? What are you trying to get your engagement to focus on? That's your starting point. And comms can advise on that, but probably it's going to be very much politically led. We want to know about X, Y, and Z, and it might be understanding what stakeholders value, support, and oppose right now, about things. It might wanting to be getting insight on why they hold the views that they do, or understanding more about what they perceive the benefits could be. Or it could be specifically on, here are some options. What is your view on them? Here is information about them. What is your view on them, and why do you hold those views? And then audiences, in comms, we're used to defining our audiences, doing our stakeholder mapping, because that will help us design our methodology, make sure we're reaching them, putting all those comms wraparounds that help us reach all the people that we want to reach. And really, it needs to make sure we have that basis. It's not just the usual suspects. It will very much inform your comms as well as what you ask, because you'll have a good view of who it is that you need to speak to. And ideally, I would say, you're probably doing that stakeholder mapping already. If you aren't, I would say, do that well and do it soon. You can start it as soon as you can. That basic influence, interest, box, and then how do you prioritize them? How are you going to um, prioritize these stakeholders to care, to be interested, to be take part in your engagement, to tell you what they think, to have a role to play? Then we move on to advocacy, and I think advocacy may very well be more possibly linked. I don't know, because we've got 21 counties doing this, haven't we? And everyone will be doing it differently, but possibly very much linked to individual council actions. If you're doing your own piece of work, we know that that will happen. Even if you've got county-wide agreement on engagement, there probably will be areas saying, well, we're going to do some work with our stakeholders and our residents because we want them to support option X. That's what we want them to do, and we want to mobilize them to say that. So you may well be doing that advocacy piece. So who are the most important people in terms of influence in your area? And that will be people, MPs and politicians and things like that. But what about big companies? You might even have some famous people. Do they care? What do they care about? Can you link into them? Because that will help secure your public interest as well. Who's influential in Parliament? Who knows the civil servants? Who knows the MPs? Who knows the parliamentary under secretaries? All those type of people. Very hard to get hold of, but your members will know, your leaders will know, and your MPs will know some of these people. So it's very much a collective effort. And then approaches. What is your engagement methodology going to look like? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Well, actually, it's probably a bit of both. And I'm sure you all know that effectively, quantitative is, getting your numbers, getting your data, getting your stats, giving you insight into what people think. And then qualitative really is helping you understand why they think it and having some in-depth conversations about their hopes, their fears, their worries, their concerns, what they're optimistic about and what they see as opportunities. Some of the nuances and reasons behind the reason they hold the opinions that they do. Your analysis, what do you want your analysis to tell you? What do you want it to set out? What specific questions do you want it to ask? How soon do you need it? What reporting do you need? Do you need it by district? Do you need it just by county level? Do you need it by ward? What demographics? All those things, which probably an engagement partner, if you're using one, will know and advise you on. But it's useful to know, okay, where's our starting point? With this, what is the minimum data that we need to have reported on? And then additional info, that's kind of your traditional comms. And I think this kind of takes two strands. There's there's your comms, which says, here's our straight up comms, which explains what we're doing here with our engagement. This is what we're asking. This is why we're asking it. This is the process we're going through. This is the deadline. All that very, very straight up stuff, which hopefully you'll agree, at least, as a group of councils working together, if not a whole county. And then there's your second level additional information, which is, this is why you should take part. This is why you should care. This is why you should get involved in this stuff. And perhaps there's some individual council level work going on in that space too. And then of course you need to grab your comms plan template and get your timeline going. Get your spreadsheet out if you dare to go near a spreadsheet, and make that project plan and as quickly as possible. And just one thing on, I did miss out a bit on audiences actually, and that is around staff. And just because I know I'm very much focusing on kind of external approaches, because that's where it feels like emphasis always gets put. But I would just say, don't forget that your staff really are a distinct audience in this. They're going to be directly impacted whatever happens. And we know that potentially on day one, we all just get cheapied across to the new council, whatever that new council looks like. And you'll probably just carry on doing your job wherever you're doing your job now. And maybe that's all they need to know. But have you told them that? Do you know that? Do they know they'll have a job? Do they know? I mean, you won't know the timeline for reorganisations or transformations once the new councils exist. But they probably want to know, have I got a job, or can I manage? Can I escape? That's the two key areas that people are really interested in. So that's kind of the model that, like I say, is almost a bit of a work in progress, because it hasn't been seen anywhere before. So be gentle with me, please. Give me constructive feedback. It's very welcome. And then I suppose I could take some questions before we go to final thoughts, because we've still got a few minutes. So that's me done. No more slides.
We've got a
Certainly work.
question from Laura. RE engagement with stakeholders, was this coordinated through the comms group that was set up? And did you have a mix of central stakeholder messages to key groups, but then supply key messages toolkits to key influencers in the organisation to pick up conversations with bespoke stakeholders at regular meetings that they had?
Yes, that's exactly what we did. So yes, the stakeholder engagement. So we had a massive, massive spreadsheet um, of a stakeholder spreadsheet covering. Obviously you've got your businesses, your communities. So you had your obvious sort of high level ones, but then we also had those influence, like you say, service influencers, or we called them relationship managers, but the same kind of thing in services, who would say, well, actually, we know all these adult social care groups. We all know all these housing tenant groups. We know these school parent groups, for example. So there was our overarching messaging, which was, why we're changing, what's changing, have your say, and obviously evolved and more throughout the period. And then at service level, once we knew change was happening, yes, we worked, and we had dedicated leads within comms then assigned to different services to support them. So for example, I had an adults and children's business partner. That person would work with adults and children's to go, okay, let's take the overarching messaging and now let's look at what does it not cover, the people you work with care about. And actually a lot of that stuff is going to be really, really here and now stuff, like, who is this going to delay my child's EHCP? Am I going to is my vulnerable older parent going to have a different care worker because she knows the one that she has now, and it's going to be really disruptive and unsettling for her if you're suddenly going to change them. Those kind of things. Those were the kind of messages that the services had to think about. So yeah, we did. It was all coordinated, but we started with a like a gigantic spreadsheet of stakeholders.
Right, we've had a couple of comments from people just saying that how helpful that was. So thank you, Georgia. We've also had another
Thank you.
question. If the engagement survey with residents isn't visible to the public, i.e. being done via sampling and telephone surveys, focus groups, etc., is there a particular public communications approach campaign you'd suggest goes alongside this?
So if you're doing so you mean like if you're doing a closed survey to get and all the rationale around that will be sensible and strong, because it will say we've done this to get a sample, we're going to get plus minus 3% confidence and all those things. But there will be, I'm sure, I don't know who asked that, I can't see, but there's probably a vocal minority that are having that but you didn't ask me thing. And I think it's you can explain, and this is really where the data and the robust process comes in. Explain the process, explain why you're doing it the way that you are. And maybe you need to look at, is there another way? Can you do some focus groups? Can you do some qualitative work which doesn't necessarily stack up in terms of the quant survey that you're doing in households to get that kind of good statistically valid sample, but perhaps you do some qualitative stuff around it to say, so people can participate, or you've even got an email inbox, that people can write to, and you have an additional report that covers that stuff off. Because what we had with one of the councils in Dorset, there was a real concerted campaign against local government reorganisation, and obviously where we'd done the open to all survey, we'd put paper copies in libraries, um, and we knew that these were massively mass copied and mass filled in. I had, I had visions of like some school exam hall where people, I'm sure it wasn't that bad, but we had huge bundle, literally delivered to a library. And our engagement partner, consultation partner, said, well, we're literally going to report on those separately, because we know what's happening here. So we won't discard them, of course we won't, they're people's opinions, but we can't have certainty of the process that that there hasn't been abuse to the process. So they were analysed, but they were presented in the final findings separately. And I'm not saying that would, the person that's asked that would be an abusive process where you are, but it might be, it is legitimate for people to say, but you didn't ask me. And I know it can feel a bit like, oh yeah, well, we don't need to, because we know that if we get our sampling right within 3% either way, we are confident that 95% of times we would get the same answer. All of that is true. All of that is accurate. All of that stacks up, but that doesn't mean it's going to cut it with those residents and say you didn't ask me. So yeah, I'd say a comms campaign, but ideally I would see is any supplementary engagement you can do, even if it's that kind of soft side. If that's what I would advise.
We've had a question, I think, referring to you earlier, spreadsheet. How did your spreadsheet and plans link with the other spreadsheet and plans from the other work streams?
Well, that's a bit, I don't know if I understand the question really. Ours was specifically on, we had our stakeholder spreadsheet, which was, that was for the program, so other people could access that if they needed to. But really, ours was about for the engagement and who we needed to engage with and who we wanted to reach through the engagement. I wouldn't say they didn't, but it didn't feel like we had gaps in that. I don't know who asked that. Maybe can I put clarification in and say that I don't know if I understand the question?
Hi,
Yeah,
hi,
it was.
sorry, it's other Georgia. Hello, Georgia.
Hi.
Hi. I was thinking more around, obviously, that's a massive spreadsheet. You've got other work streams. They're probably doing their planning and putting things on spreadsheets. How did you ensure that that all coordinated and you weren't potentially all putting in
The whole thing.
directions? Yeah.
Well, so yeah, good point. So we would get our data for our spreadsheet. It would come through the relationship managers. So we weren't going out to community groups, for example, or say the VCS. It wasn't comms going out to them going, oh, hello, VCS, we need all your contacts of everybody in Bournemouth or Dorset or Poole or whatever to add to our spreadsheet. We would get that through the relationship leads within the council. And then we had a really good program management structure in place. So it was program managed quite tightly, in a way that I say tightly. There was trust and a lot of delegation, because otherwise you'll spend your whole time writing reports for the next program board and not doing any work ever that actually achieves anything. But there was good program governance in that the program board, we knew what had been delegated where and what was happening, and people knew when they had to report back up and when they didn't. Does that sort of help? Yeah. Thanks. Nice to see you.
Right, we've had a couple more questions. Did you get any extra support as a comms group, and how much, if yes, to deliver this alongside the business as usual aspects of our roles that still need to be done?
Yeah, we did. So I was the comms lead, but I had so we because we were all working together, we did have a comms group. So for this stage, it was mostly myself working with the head of comms from the county. I was already comms lead for Poole and Bournemouth at this point. So, but we had a comms group, so we would divvy out, just sit and divvy out tasks. Like you do. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Very much like that. But once we got to the point where we were putting in a case, and we wanted to then, which I haven't covered off today at all, but we then wanted to persuade the government to, actually back this and go for the change. I got a kind of effectively like a campaign lead, like a branding, campaign delivery colleague in who was absolutely amazing and got a load of amazing, brilliant content. So he led on all the web content, a lot of video and loads of really good short form video and things like that. I mean, he was such a perfectionist as well, so it was all really, really excellent. And also branding too. But effectively, the comms teams just so that was effectively it. Was we had and we had an extra. We had a comms lead for service comms, working with the leads like I talked about just now, when service redesign for staff and also to link up with service users. And we did have an additional FTE come in to support on that as well. And on the engagement side, the engagement group commissioned additional support to actually run the engagement, so host the survey, manage, produce the report and all that, and run the workshops and all the rest of it. They specified, they commissioned, they oversaw, they did quality assurance on the piece of work, but they did commission that in.
You might have, the next question you might have just covered when you were just explaining the wider team, but who analysed the data, such as repetitive survey results from the library? Was that in-house or external?
Yeah, it was external.
Yeah, that's fine. And the last comment that we've got, I've got about 5 minutes left if anybody wants to put anything else in. This is from Andrew. He said, I'd be interested to hear from others on the call as to how they've been promoting their consultations, engagement, both with our own channels as well as spend on advertising. I've also heard some wide variety of engagement exercises, e.g. Norfolk doing quite a broad 2-stage process, whereas others doing much more of a comms campaign towards a specific result. Yeah. And that is the end of the comments and the questions in the chat. So I'll just give it about 30 seconds, and if we've got nothing else, I will wrap us up.
Yeah. Okay, shall I share my final thoughts then?
Yeah. Sorry, Georgia, I forgot you had that.
That's all right. No, it's fine. Yeah. Don't worry. we're always well rehearsed here, aren't we?
Yeah.
This stuff is probably, you'll probably look at this and think, oh, you know, she's teaching me to suck eggs here, you know, be quiet, Georgia. But, you know, I would say, and anyone that knows me well will have probably heard me harp on about this quite a lot, about comms being, you know, it's that thing we talk about the seat at the table. But, you know, being on a program board, it was so invaluable, because you're party to everything, that's going on across the organization in terms of what decisions are being made, what inputs are happening, what the chief execs are thinking, what the divisions are, and you can, you know, so you can spot the stuff that's coming up. So be in a room where those decisions are made. You can advise them, you can listen, you can learn, you can, you know, learn a bit more about how to be a really smooth operator in these really, really difficult situations by watching some of the interactions that people have. And then another obvious one for comms, have a really consistent, compelling, relevant and realistic narrative. But key to that is to make it relatable to people on the ground, your residents, your stakeholders, but also that chimes with what you put into Westminster and the way that decision is going to be made. And I would definitely say coax, support and encourage your top voices. We did a lot of this. Once our submission we did a lot of this. And we to get advocacy for our proposal. Yes, through almost like a public affairs approach, writing to government and things like that, but actually to win the public over and get them on side. So we did a lot of that. Brian rose above the politics, and it's so difficult. And I know looking back, I sailed really close to the line. I know Mel Baldwin, who is my colleague at the time. She's on the call, and she's probably chuckling right now because she'll remember. But yeah, I think you know, I don't think I ever crossed it, but I was probably close at some points, because it's easy to get so passionate and wrapped up in this and live this. So just, I was, you know, balance your passion, your own passion and professionalism appropriately, and that kind of leads on to get the support you need when you need it. And yes, I'm talking about capacity and skills, because we can't do everything, but also well-being, your own well-being. Find ways to step away from this, and just take a bit of time and breathe, and have your network. You know, the public sector comms is awesome at supporting itself in networks and reaching out and just having those conversations and saying, how are you doing this? Or, oh my God, this is just too much now, kind of thing. So have those networks, get the support that you need when you need it. I think that's it from me, and over to Michael.
Yeah, so just to basically, as the slide says here, how can we help? We can overcome the overwhelm. We can help with you building the approach to comms engagement. We can also facilitate workforce approach to change, and we can assist and offer some additional capacity. So if there's anything else you want to know about Truman Change, please feel free to have a look on our website or engage with either myself or Georgia. And it doesn't look like we've got any more comments or questions coming in. So I just want to say thank you again to Georgia for today's session. Georgia's contact details were on the slide there. And I also want to say, it's all right. Sorry. I also want to say thank you all for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. Before we do finish, I just want to give you some dates for your diary. And we have another change chat on the 27th of June, which is on service reviews and evaluations. You can find your how to book via the link that I've just posted. Also, if you do have any other subjects you would like us to discuss at future change chats, please put in the chat and we will definitely consider them. And if you have enjoyed today, we have several more change chats available on our website. These do cover topics such as the LGR. We've got housing, change management, culture change, And we will also be hosting future LGR chats as well. So please keep an eye on that link I've said before, or on our socials for when they become available, or via Georgia, who will share on her LinkedIn, I'm sure. So for the next steps, as I mentioned, you will all receive an email which will have a copy of the recording, and that will come out probably middle of next week. And then finally, just as I've touched on, if you'd like to have a chat with any of the team about anything Truman Change related, please get in touch, and that can be arranged. Doesn't look like we've got any more questions, just a lot of people saying thank you. Really interesting presentation, that, Georgia, so thank you from me as well. And I just want to finally say thank you again for everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in a future Change Chat. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks, folks.